the fourth Sunday of Advent. Last Sunday we had joyful Gaudete Sunday. Today, the fourth Sunday, it's quieter, prayerful, waiting. Joy is coming, expectations. I would encourage you to read, listen to the first reading, because it's a theme of God's ways, generally, in the history, through the Hebrew Scriptures and through the Gospels of Jesus. God makes much of little. And the first reading is, you, Bethlehem, not considered one of the greats of the clans, but from you will come the one who will lead you to freedom. His greatness will be for all the earth, and his name will be peace. Making much of very little. Little Israel, even littler Bethlehem, the city of David, from which Jesus will be carried as a child into Bethlehem in the womb of his mother, out of Bethlehem as they flee into Egypt with their arms, in her arms. And the gospel. We had the Immaculate Conception earlier in the month, and we had the gospel is always the Annunciation, the angel of the Lord, Gabriel, appearing to Mary and announcing to her a fantastic promise, a practical gift, Jesus. Who he will be, what he will be, she does not know. But he tells her he will be great. She doesn't know the future. Today's gospel is the extension of the Annunciation. What does she do? This little girl in a little town, a town not thought well of in, say, the larger towns of Capernaum and Jerusalem itself, making much of little. It's a theme of God's ways. And the gospel is exciting in a way. She takes off. Why? Well, she has been told that Elizabeth, her kinswoman, is in her 6th month with a pregnancy. And she is too old to be pregnant. But she is, a promise, making much of little. So she goes. It's called the visitation and the encounter. It's a journey, it's a visiting, it's a staying. She stayed there till Elizabeth's child is born. And that's quite an exciting event because, as you will hear in the gospel and read in the gospel, the child in her womb not just made a move like babies do in mothers' wombs, but jumped, leapt for joy. Much of little. I have pondered along the journey, say when Mary goes into the hillside, so she's going, did she stop and look around at the little town of Nazareth? And she might, at least in her soul, in her memory, say, what was that all about? Did she doubt? She kept walking. She kept going. She lived whatever her interior, mental, psychological, emotional responses were. She made a statement, let it be done. Let my journey be done. Let whatever I find. at Elizabeth's house. Now, did she go, and this is something to think about, did she go to see if what was promised her was a reality? Was she going for proof, which is a very human thing? We want the security of truth. We assume that Mary trusted, even though she may have had questions. And yes, Elizabeth was pregnant, and yes, Elizabeth shouted for joy, "Blessed am I, because blessed are you among women." And we are among women, you and I, in our pregnancies, in our trustings. I am too old. You are not married. It's impossible, but it is. Promise, fulfillment. Making much of little. Maybe these days in preparing for the birth of Jesus, we have little faith, maybe big questions. The world has big questions about Jesus. But Wednesday and Tuesday night this week, the world will have to take a second, a little time, because maybe it's too big for our little minds. Our minds are little. And he makes much of little and challenges and invites us because we have questions and doubts. What is all that about? She trusted. She journeyed. One more thing. In Luke's gospel, there's just a little hint about Luke 101. And it's the very first thing in Luke's gospel. When there's an encounter with God, it immediately becomes transformable, transmittable, mission, journey, visitation. Every time in Luke's gospel, and you can go through Luke's gospel this way, but every time there was an encounter with Jesus, it was the beginning of living that relationship. And whom did he call? Mary, Elizabeth, Joseph, Peter, little, poor fishermen, little people, making much of little. To be met, raised up, to be called presence of peace, the greatness of God displayed through the littleness of our lives. And the Eucharist, so little, so fragile. The bread of the Eucharist you wouldn't even serve at Christmas dinner. It's so tasteless. He makes much of little in the Eucharist. He makes much of little in Mary and Bethlehem and the stable. And he makes great much of you and of me as we journey being met by him, encountering our littleness, sharing his greatness in our little ways.